A hand recount is announced in Georgia. Biden's lead continues to shrink in Arizona, and hundreds of sworn affidavits are claiming voter fraud. This is no time to give up the fight. I'll explain why. It's time for Hold the Line.
At that time, I will designate that the ROA will be the presidential race. With the margin being so close, it will require a full by-hand recount in each county. This will help build confidence. It will be an audit, a recount, and a recanvass all at once.
Welcome, friends. That was Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger announcing a county-by-county hand recount of the presidential vote in Georgia. As things stand right now, Trump and Biden are separated by just over 14,000 votes in that state. Meanwhile, in Arizona, where the counting continues, Joe Biden's lead continues to narrow. In that state, President Trump trails Biden by under 12,000 votes. Despite the razor-thin margins in key states, as well as growing evidence of voting irregularities, there are those on the right who are calling for President Trump to throw in the towel. In an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, former senior advisor to President George W. Bush, Karl Rove, wrote that the Trump campaign's efforts, quote, are unlikely to move a single state from Mr. Biden's column, and they're certainly not enough to change the final outcome. Okay, Carl, that may be true, but I got a question. So what? Why is there all of a sudden this tremendous rush? Why so much pressure to move through a process that anybody who's being honest would have to say is legitimate? There's nothing that the president has done that goes outside of constitutional norms, nothing that he's done that's a violation of the trust the American people have put in him up to this point. So why all of the drama? Why do they keep telling us to move past this and not get the due process for over 70 million voters who want President Trump to have 4 more years? Why should we accept the Democrat narrative of events? Let's remember, friends, they never accepted the results of the 2016 election, and it wasn't just in rhetorical terms. They decided to use the Democrat-aligned media, the Democrat Party, the deep state. They used the federal bureaucracy as a weapon against the Trump administration. That's what Russia collusion was all about. You'll notice they don't accuse Republicans of cheating in elections because I think deep down they kind of know that's their thing. And beyond that, if they were to say that there was cheating, we would turn around and say, great, let's take a look. Let's see who's actually cheating in the election. And then there'd be no wiggle room. They wouldn't be able to say, why are you undermining our democracy? Undermining our democracy by questioning the results of an election that's razor thin, that is getting automatic recounts, getting a hand recount in Georgia? Why wouldn't we question those results? Is there really anybody who would claim that there's no fraud at all in the election? Is there anybody who would go out there and say that over 140 million ballots cast and they were all counted exactly the right way? We're under 1, maybe 2% of the vote in a number of states. That is on the razor's edge, friends, and they don't want us to take a second look? We have to ask why. Why do we have courts? Why do we have the laws in place about elections, these review processes, if they can't be used? When would there be a better time to use them than now? But you see, if, let's say, we were to listen to the cries from the left about how this is about being gentlemanly, this is about the president showing what a distinguished public figure he is, of course, on the way out, because they don't believe that he's going to be president anymore, and caving somehow makes him a better person, would unite the American people. Well, let's play that out for a second. What happens if the President of the United States decides that he is conceding while these legal challenges keep going forward? They would say that he's being disingenuous, that he's a liar, which they've already said 1,000,000 times. Why are you still challenging in court when you've already conceded? So they make a demand to concede, knowing that that would nullify, at least in the court of public opinion, anything that the campaign's trying to do with the law. We can all see the game. Just work it out in your head, and it becomes so clear. Why should he concede at this point? What would that do? The claim is that we are exposing ourselves to undue risk to our institutions, to our national security, because we have not yet bent the knee. We've all learned during 4 years of Trump's presidency that bending the knee gets you nowhere with the left. It's like signing your confession in the Soviet Union. Guess what? You get punished even more severely because you've agreed that you were in the wrong. Trump conceding at this point would only be used as a club to bludgeon all of his supporters. See, he should have conceded weeks ago. We know how they play the game. We've gotten a very painful lesson in this as a nation for 4 years. In fact, if you look not just at how they've treated Trump, but the Kavanaugh debacle of 2018, we know that the left is willing to break any norm, to break the very basis of our legal foundation, of our legal fundamentals to our system, by making sure that they can get their way. Whatever they have to do, whatever is necessary, those are the tactics that they will employ. So of course we don't want to bend the knee. And voter fraud is real, my friends. Let's assume for a second that President Trump does not, in fact, prove these large numbers of ballots. Let's assume for a moment that the President of the United States is just off on his own here and there's only hundreds that change. Even Karl Rove admitted that there could be hundreds of ballots that are invalidated, maybe getting into the thousands. Well, let's assume that that all happens. Why wouldn't we want to know? Shouldn't we see? Isn't it worth looking at this? Think about all the different federal bureaucracies and all the different checking and rechecking that goes on for far less important matters than this. And the Department of Justice has, close to 100,000 employees? The intelligence community has far more than that. And we have enormous resources as a government. Shouldn't we know exactly where problems happen? We've already seen some problems. Dead people voting. Machines that are counting improperly, or software that's forcing vote tallies to go to the wrong person. That seems to matter a whole lot. Shouldn't we know the full extent of it? Shouldn't we know where it goes? In fact, the very people who are claiming that this is necessary for us, that this is needed in order to protect our institutions, aren't willing to allow us the due diligence to protect those institutions. That's the irony of this situation. Because there will be a midterm election in 2 years and a presidential election in 4, and trust me when I tell you, there's not going to be some enormous rebound in good faith and public faith in our institutions. It's not going to happen. You're not going to have a coming together. The calls for unity right now that we're seeing from the left are just about silencing their opponents. That's what they want. Be unified with us, which means do what we say. I say no. I say keep the fight going. I tell you right now, as I look at these races that are continuing, because the counts are still in flux, we're still seeing what the final tally is, what possible reason could there be to throw in the towel at this point? We need the truth. We want transparency. We should all be able to agree on that. So what exactly is the benefit here? What do we learn from this if we step away? Why cave at this juncture? No one has a good answer to that other than some version of Orange Man bad. Donald Trump is so uniquely evil and horrible that he should not even be allowed what any other presidential candidate would be and is under the law, questioning the results of these different ballot counts in states that have yet to even certify. People that keep referring to Biden as the president-elect, I guess Georgia's recount doesn't matter. What's the point of the process if we already have an outcome that we must all accept? They're insisting on a finality that is not there. And they're demanding that we abandon not only the fight for 4 more years of Trump, but also core principles of our very system. What holds it together? Our belief that both sides play by the same rules and that both sides have the same tools, the same avenues at their disposal to find out who really won, because political power is something that you can't transfer from one set of hands into another without good faith, without a government that can be trusted. After the break, we have senior legal advisor to the Trump campaign, Jenna Ellis, joining us to give an update on the president's legal strategy. Stick around. These days, being prepared for the unknown is more important than ever. I'm sure you've noticed the world we live in today is anything but predictable. Where's the stock market going? How's the dollar going to look in a year, in 5 years? We could all use something reliable right now, something tried and true. What could be more reliable than real gold and silver? I'm talking about real gold and silver you can actually hold right in your hands. Call the Oxford Gold Group now and learn how easy it is to get real gold and silver sent securely directly to your home, or how you can have real gold and silver placed in your IRA or 401k, just like I have. Such an easy process. Take action today. Call the Oxford Gold Group at 833-600-GOLD. Ask for your free guide on owning gold and silver. Again, call the Oxford Gold Group right now at 833-600-GOLD. The Oxford Gold Group is the only gold company I trust. Call them right now, 833-600-GOLD. One more time, that's 833-600-GOLD. President Trump is really ramping up his legal battle across the country. Here's a quick breakdown. Yesterday, the campaign filed a lawsuit in Michigan alleging that credentialed election challengers were blocked from having sufficient view of the vote counting process, resulting in ineligible ballots being tallied. In Pennsylvania, the campaign filed 5 appeals on the Philadelphia County Board of Elections decision, saying incomplete ballots were counted. And today in Arizona, a judge heard oral arguments regarding a current lawsuit alleging Maricopa County poll workers wrongly rejected votes. And that's only the surface. Let's bring in someone who's on the forefront of this legal battle, Trump 2020 senior legal advisor and personal attorney to President Trump, Jenna Ellis. Jenna, thank you so much. Great to see you.
Great to see you too, Buck. Thanks for having me.
All right. Start with what is, you think, the most important of these challenges? What state is it in, and what are the allegations?
Yeah, so of course, every legal vote should count and should count fairly and accurately. And so that's why you see these widespread lawsuits across the country to ensure that. So that's the uniform goal of all of these lawsuits. But really, the most important thing, I think, is currently in Pennsylvania and in Michigan and likely a few other states where we are going to be challenging to not certify any of the election results until we know that they are fair and they're not fraudulent. And so right now you do have recounts that will be going on in Georgia and Wisconsin, so they're not anywhere close to certifying those results. But in Pennsylvania, we actually got just a couple of hours ago a really significant victory where a judge there held that the Secretary of State cannot simply unilaterally change election law. She is not the legislature. And so what the judge held is that she gave incorrect legal guidance to election officials to count late ballots that arrived after the deadline on Election Day. And so that's a really significant victory. Of course, Justice Alito had already required through his order that came from the Supreme Court that the late ballots had to be segregated. So now the question is, can we actually determine which ballots were late? Were they segregated? And if not, what does that mean in terms of the legal remedy?
How many ballots are we thinking may be at issue here?
That we don't know yet, and I don't want to speculate on the numbers, but certainly a significant amount, especially when you look at the margins of what's going on in Pennsylvania and you look at everything all together. And so when you look at, of course, you know, whether this is 1,000 ballots, whether this is 100,000, whether this is 1,000,000 ballots, this goes to the integrity of Pennsylvania. And of course, their 20 electoral votes absolutely matter. And if we can't get to a fair and accurate count and the election results there are irredeemably compromised, then it will fall to the court or the state legislature to fashion a correct and constitutionally correct outcome. And I'd point out as well, Buck, that our constitutional system is so great that when the founders adopted this as our system, they built in methods to make sure that if elections were compromised, if there was any kind of corruption or foreign influence, that we had these safeguards to not disenfranchise our voters. I'd encourage everyone to read Alexander Hamilton's Federalist 68 that specifically talks about the selection of the United States president and why it is so important that the Electoral College and those slate of electors have several different ways constitutionally of being selected. Of course, that's currently through the vote and the will of the people. But if that is compromised, then the state legislature under Article 2 can select the manner by which they actually appoint those electors. So we have some constitutional safeguards there that if any of these states, including Pennsylvania, are irredeemably compromised, we have constitutional solutions.
So Jenna, tell me about these affidavits that are often talked about now by people who are involved in either transporting ballots or counting ballots, that are sworn affidavits under penalty of perjury that claim that people saw straight up fraud, not just irregularities or problems in the system, that there are people intentionally doing things they weren't supposed to do in the system. Is the campaign looking at these affidavits? Have you been able to review any of them, and are you expecting there to be more?
Yeah, so we're still getting reports almost by the minute of people who are willing to sign affidavits. We're reviewing all of this. We've, of course, seen a lot of, and this isn't just reports. This isn't just, kind of this minimized, there is no fraud. There is no widespread fraud like the mainstream media tries to allege. They're trying to just coronate Joe Biden and just forget that this system of legal challenges, of recounts, of course, is fair and appropriate to make sure we get to the correct legal outcome. And they're just wanting to minimize this. So, we have allegations like in Michigan, for example, when we filed that lawsuit on Monday to ask that the results not be certified, because we're not seeing just irregularities. Like you said, we are seeing outright fraud. And for the mainstream media to simply dismiss this and say, oh, there's no proof of that, they are basically accusing these people that are signing affidavits under oath of a felony and of perjury. And last time I checked, nobody in the mainstream media has stepped down from their anchor or contributor position and has joined the Michigan federal bench. So until that time, I don't care what the court of public opinion says. This matters what an actual court of justice and equity says.
A lot of people are asking, Jenna, when will we see proof of fraud? And, last night on Tucker's show on Fox, he laid out what I've been talking about for days. I spoke to a friend of mine, Sean Parnell, on this show earlier in the week, who says that he knows in his race, it's only one congressional race, but it was an important one, very important to him, that there were dead people who voted. Is there any explanation? I mean, Tucker talked about this last night on his show. We've seen lots of reports on this, only from some parts of the media, of course. Is there any explanation for this? And when are we going to have an actual accounting for what seems to be fraud that's already proven?
Well, yeah, and it is. And this is why it's so important to have our day in court, and that the court can actually look at the evidence that we have and that we have alleged in our complaint. And also that's why it's so incredibly important to not certify false results. And so, for the mainstream media to just simply ignore this and say that there is no proof. No, we have all of the videos that Facebook and big tech has been trying, and Twitter have been trying to censor. We have, the video evidence, the picture evidence, and sworn affidavits. And so this is not about the credibility of the evidence. We have that. It's about making sure to fashion a remedy that is constitutionally appropriate to get to a legitimate outcome. We are far past, oh, this is simply an allegation. There's absolutely proof, and it's just a matter of whether or not the court will step in and say it matters to tell the states that they cannot certify the results until we fashion an appropriate remedy.
So that's what I was going to ask you next. What should people expect here as the timeline for, let's say, between now and the end of the month, when some of these states will have already supposed to have certified their results? Is the campaign's legal position right now that they want judges to grant, an injunction to prevent the certification until these issues can be sufficiently addressed?
Yes, and if you look at the prayer for relief at the end of the Michigan lawsuit and the Pennsylvania lawsuit, and again, there are recounts that will happen in Wisconsin and Georgia, and so after those recounts, if we need to, we will file for injunctions there. But the position of the campaign in these states is that we need an injunction to stop the states from certifying results until we know that those results are accurate. And this should matter to all Americans, that we don't certify false results. And this matters that every legal vote counts. This is not about just the allegation that we're trying to simply get President Trump reelected. That was what the campaign was for prior to Election Day. Post-Election Day, We're no longer in campaign mode. We are now in legal mode to make sure that this is a fair and legitimate election. And President Trump has said this, and I speak to him quite frequently these days, and he is committed to making sure that this election is legitimate and that the American people can rely on the outcome. And he knows that this isn't just about his election. It's not just about 2020. It's about every future election, because we have to keep free and fair elections in this country. Otherwise, our constitutional republic is basically gone.
Jenna, thanks so much for joining, sharing your expertise, and thanks for staying in this fight. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
The U.S. is logging over 100,000 new COVID cases a day, leading to tighter restrictions around the country. We're going to take a closer look at that in tonight's Buck Brief. My friends, our constitutional republic has rarely faced the perils we do today. Mob rule, the push for socialism, violence on the streets, suppression of our most basic freedoms. Edmund Burke said it best, all it takes for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. If you want to help preserve America right now, while we still can, join AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, the fastest growing conservative group in America. Joining AMAC gives you access to money-saving benefits, cutting-edge news, and a great bi-monthly magazine. But more importantly, AMAC fights for you. A socialist storm is brewing. You can see it. If you care about our future like I do, join AMAC today. Over 2 million constitutional conservatives like you and me have already joined AMAC. Stand with us by joining right now. Just go to amac.us/buck. That's amac.us/buck. The benefits of AMAC membership are great, but the cause is even greater. Join today, amac.us/buck. Looks like the long-feared fall wave of COVID-19 may be arriving, at least if you listen to some of America's governors. The U.S. is now recording over 100,000 new cases of the virus every day, spurring action in a number of states, particularly Democrat blue states. This week, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo announced a slew of new restrictions. Starting tomorrow, bars and restaurants that serve alcohol will now be required to close at 10 p.m. with only takeout and delivery being allowed. In addition, private gatherings will now be limited to 10 people. That includes people's homes. Happy Thanksgiving! The new rules are undoubtedly going to impact local businesses that are already struggling under onerous restrictions. With that in mind, it's time for the Buck Brief. This is really where we are, friends. This is what we are dealing with right now in America. A second series of lockdowns. I remember when it was 15 days to slow the spread. You'll notice it was never stop the spread. We were sold on this idea of going with this extreme lockdown scenario that previous peer-reviewed science published on the CDC's own website, stretching back for decades, said is not a good idea. Not effective enough when you look at the cost to justify all of the pain, all of the disruption. But that changed. They said, give us 15 days. And then it was 30 days, and then it was 60, then 90, then 6 months. Now we're going into 9 months of some form of restriction, depending on where you are in the country. And they're telling us to be prepared for perhaps a very unmerry Christmas and a Thanksgiving without that much to be thankful for. Lori Lightfoot of Chicago, the mayor, she tweeted this yesterday. These are the new rules for Chicagoans. Stay home unless for essential reasons. Stop having guests over, including family members you do not live with. Avoid non-essential travel. Cancel traditional Thanksgiving plans. I'm not making this up, folks. You now have politicians telling you, cancel your Thanksgiving. Not allowed to be with your family. I told you this, if you listen to my radio show, for months in advance. Just with a Biden alleged victory at this point, you don't have the end of all this nonsense. In fact, they like the power, they like the control, and they're going to double down on this. What you're going to have are all these restrictions coming back into place under state health authorities, places like Illinois, California, New York. Oh, that's right, California is also increasing its own lockdowns. And it's because they've decided that this is the only way we can move forward as a society. Yeah, we've got a vaccine coming. Guess what? The vaccine's not going to end all this. Not in time. you're looking at a very long, cold winter where they're not taking into account what we've already seen from lockdowns in the past. Who thinks this stuff is going to work better this time? I was here in New York City, the worst hit place in the United States. I live in Midtown. I was taking the subway during the pandemic's period of maximum spread, February and March of 2020, multiple times a day. I'm going to crowded bars. I'm in all the worst possible places. And then I remember we were told, lockdown, stay at home. We did that. And for months, the virus continued to spread and tear its way through this city, as well as New Jersey, as well as then other parts of the country as it grew. Now, we were masking, we were social distancing, we were doing these things. It didn't stop the virus. And there were massive costs to this. Undiagnosed cancer, kids being pulled out of school. We'll get to that in a second. The enormous economic implications, millions of businesses perhaps will have gone bankrupt this year because of COVID-19. The restaurant industry, entertainment, travel, decimated, worse than decimated actually. And for what? This is the big victory, a series of rolling lockdowns. This is no way to run a society, it's no way to run a country, but it's exactly how Biden and the clowns around him are going to do things if and when he is the next occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Here is Dr. Mike Osterholm, a Biden COVID advisor. He shared this on Twitter. We could pay for a package right now to cover all of the wages, lost wages for individual workers, to small companies, to medium companies, city, state. If we did that, we could lock down for 4 to 6 weeks. So spend another, let's say, $2 trillion and keep us all locked in our homes for 4 to 6 weeks. Does anybody want to place bets as to whether that 4 to 6 weeks under a Biden administration lockdown would turn into 2 months, 3 months, 4 months? Once again, just like a lot of other seasonal respiratory viruses like influenza that comes and goes every year, it will recede in May, in June, and they'll say, see, we were victorious against the virus. Right, sure you were. All these annoying policies, masking up in between bites of food, masking up when you stand up from the table at the restaurant to walk to a bathroom. Got to mask then, not while you're sitting and eating. People sitting next to me on planes, because I actually traveled during the pandemic. Oh my gosh, so brave, right? People sitting next to me drinking for 45 minutes, having a little sip of the soda, mask down. But get up to go to the bathroom without your mask on and people look at you like you're a serial killer. What's going on, folks? This is lunacy. It's crazy. Everybody should be able to see that. At least with schools, which we know that the teachers' unions are a bunch of, lazy buffoons who are trying to bilk the taxpayers more than they already do. So they said that they wouldn't go to school. It's too dangerous. It's dangerous for the children. It's not dangerous for the children. Even the New York Times has to admit that. Their editorial board, the commies over there at the Gray Lady. Ending in-person instruction right now would be a mistake, given the evidence of how little the virus has spread there so far and the devastating consequences that would follow for academic progress, as well as for working parents like subway operators and nurses. Yeah, you don't say. Schools should never have closed. Children are at almost zero risk from this, and adults in lower risk age categories, just like the people that are delivering your food and stocking the shelves at the grocery store, they can do their jobs too. Teachers can teach. You're over 60, first of all, most of them will be retired at that age, but not all of them. I understand extra precautions. You're in your 30s and 40s, which a vast majority of teachers are, you're gonna be fine. Unbelievable, friends. We're heading back into it. We haven't learned the lesson. This statist, the authoritarian left, they think that they're gonna save us all. While the cases are gonna keep going up, you know what they're gonna tell you? When it's clear to anybody paying attention that this doesn't work, that there's not some magic cloth that prevents anybody from getting this virus, you know what they're gonna say? We didn't lock down hard enough. We didn't do enough. It's on us. It's our fault. Get ready for it. Remember, I told you this. While Trump is focused on legal battles, Joe Biden's already looking toward transition. So what would a potential Biden administration look like? After the break, we'll talk to the First TV's very own Jesse Kelly, the Jolly Green Jesse. Welcome back. While the Trump administration continues to mount legal battles, the Biden team focuses on taking the White House. The former VP picked Ron Klain as his chief of staff, praising him on Twitter, saying Ron's deep, varied experience and capacity to work with people all across the political spectrum is precisely what he needs in a White House chief of staff. As this transition team tries to move forward, Bernie Sanders is telling Biden that he'll honor his progressive promises. Well, what does that actually mean?
Do I expect that the Biden administration will do everything that Bernie Sanders believes? No, I don't. But do I expect that they will come forward and keep their word in maintaining and legislating on the proposals which we agree to? Yes, I do.
Oh, he does, huh? The radical left is already trying to infiltrate a Biden administration without him even officially winning. So what does the Biden White House actually look like? Let's bring in Jesse Kelly, host of I'm Right, to discuss. Mr. Kelly, good to see you, sir.
That made me miss Bernie, Buck. Is that bad? I kind of love Bernie. I think it's hilarious that our socialists in this country who has all this wild support is always this hunched over guy with the horrible accent, and he always sounds like he's spitting. I would have rather had President Bernie. I think he would have been hilarious.
Well, I also feel like Bernie gives you what the Democrats actually want instead of pretending that there's something else, right? I mean, what you have, I think, is a choice between the incrementalism of the establishment with Biden, Pelosi, Schumer, those types. They're still trying to take you to the final destination of democratic socialism, whatever that means. But how quickly do you think a Biden administration is actually going to move in comparison to what, say, the AOC Warren wing would want?
I think it'll depend on, honestly, how this Georgia Senate race goes, because let's be honest, Joe Biden is not, and this for once is not insulting, he's too old and weak to hold off his left flank. You've already seen what I've seen, Buck. Nancy Pelosi doesn't have the votes as of now to be Speaker of the House. The AOCs, we can all make fun of her for being a moron all we want. She's young. And these other Democrats are old and weak. This administration is going to yank radically to the left because all his advisors are going to be leftists. All the power in Congress are going to be leftists. There is not going to be a check on them besides potentially a GOP Senate. So they're going to go left and go left hard. They're only doing all this bipartisan, let's heal, let's unify stuff right now because they won. These are the same people that were pooping in the street for 4 years. I'm not buying it.
Very interesting. Okay, let's get Representative Hakeem Jeffries said on a private call with House caucus members, do we want to win, do we want to govern, or do we want to be internet celebrities? I think it's a useful conversation for us to have because the socialism message wasn't helpful. I don't think that is something that the left wing of the Democrat Party even agrees with a little bit. In fact, I've spoken to some Bernie supporters, believe it or not, because I know a few, who will tell you that they think defund the police is still a message worth having.
See, this is the problem with the balkanization of even the Democratic Party, Buck. I know, because I've spoken to some people too on the Democrat side, that these Democrats, they kind of have a suburb district, not in the inner city. They either lost or almost lost because of all that idiotic defund the police stuff. But that person hears radically different things than someone in downtown Chicago hears. These huge urban districts, they're all about that life. And their voters, these people win by 20, 30 points every election. They're not going to get bounced by a Republican. And the Democrat primary voter in these big cities is all about it. The Democratic Party has a really weird coalition they have to try to hold together. It was always weird, wasn't it? You were trying to hold together unions along with the Green New Deal people, and that doesn't make sense. And now you're trying to, now they have this whole new woke identity politics thing where we have to hold the transgender Nazi Eskimos in with the Black Lives Matter people, and they have to get along with the Antifa people. It's a nightmare, and they're fracturing, as they all will, because now they're all going to want their pound of flesh.
Jesse, let's talk about COVID for a second here. You're not a doctor, I'm not a doctor, and neither of us are particularly adept at playing one on TV. However, I do pay attention to the reality around me, and I do know that it seems we are all told things that we must take on faith that we've seen are not true. That lockdowns are this great idea that will save hundreds of thousands of lives. This is a mantra that Biden and the Democrats seem to have still managed. They're winning this debate right now. What do you think it takes for people to realize it's just not true?
Starving to death. I genuinely believe it'll take people starving to death en masse for people to realize that locking down an economy in response to a virus is the most financially damaging concept in the history of mankind. Since God put man on this earth, he has not come up with a more financially damaging concept than this. And we all did it right at the beginning. Now, not you and I, thankfully. We were up there from day one saying, do not lock down. Don't lock down. What are you people insane? But society as a whole, remember, this was pushed worldwide, not just in America. But here, left and right, lock down. That's the solution. Lock down. Stand 6 feet away. How stupid is that, by the way? Stand 6 feet from everybody. Make sure you put on a mask. I don't care if it's a 50-cent mask you bought at 7-Eleven, and lock down the economy. And now it doesn't matter, Buck. Half the people on the right think this too. Well, I guess we got to go home again. The truth is, it's going to take so much pain for people to realize how dumb this is because the narrative has been cemented.
And I think people also need to realize that they've already prepared, meaning our bureaucratic overlords, for a world in which the vaccine is out there, but not enough. Even at 90%, even at 90% efficacy, and with millions of people getting it, let's say by February or March, they're going to say, can't take that risk, folks. And what I think will be fascinating are the campaigns that tell us that I'm just predicting will happen, that say, even if you're vaccinated, that doesn't mean you get to stop wearing a mask. I can almost guarantee that will happen.
Oh, it's time to just accept what a lot of this is. You and I know, because we know enough politicians. Politicians, they're a bunch of dorks. They're a bunch of lifelong dorks who never had any money, success, or women, and they go into politics because they think they're going to get one or all of the three. That's why people become politicians. And when you give lifelong dorks the control to tell successful people, shut down your business, put this on, you have to do this, make sure you go home by this point in time, they don't give that up. When in the history of the world have people gotten power and just willingly given it back because they don't want it anymore? That doesn't happen. As soon as all of America slumped their shoulders and went home and big government told them to, these people, they knew they were going to do that for life. This thing isn't going to go away for 20 years. You watch.
Jesse, that's kind of discouraging. Where are you on the, I can't say, I don't think it's 20 years, but I think 2021 is basically burned up by the fear, paranoia, and control of the Democrats, especially if you get a Biden administration. Where are you on the fight right now? We've been talking about a lot on the show here with this recounts, ballot counting, fraud allegations. What do you think?
I think there was voter fraud. I think there was probably a lot of voter fraud, but I need to see all the evidence of it. Everybody has a grainy internet video right now, but there's certainly enough out there to show there was some. Was it significant enough to change the election? Possibly. I've seen numbers that could say it was, but maybe not. But the more important thing is, Buck, there are two things. One, we're never going to have an election again in this country where both sides agree it was legitimate, because now everybody thinks everybody's cheating all the time. And two, if Republicans can't find the balls right now to make sure they find out how bad this was and fix it going forward, we're never winning another national election. This actually isn't even about Trump. You can hate Trump's guts. You're never having a Republican president of the United States ever again, unless you figure out if the Democrats cheated and how they did it and stop them from doing it the next time. Because if Democrats did this, then they have a blueprint to win every election ever. And why would they change? Of course they wouldn't.
I can't understand even what the argument is from some on the right. I mean, they're making the argument, and it's something along the lines of a fancy way of saying, Jesse, now's a great time to get a pat on the head from the incoming overlords of the Biden administration. Let's not upset them. I mean, Fake Tapper over at CNN said it pretty clearly. Think about your career, folks. You really want to be one of these dead enders who's going for, that's a classic, nice media profile you got there, conservatives. Be ashamed if something happened to it from one of the ultimates when it comes to doing that kind of stuff, Mr. Fake Tapper over there. But I think that's real, as in people are looking at this right now as a moment of a career transition, much more than the risk of not finding out how much fraud and how the fraud happened in this election.
They're all looking out for themselves. They have been doing it for 4 years, but this is mainly a geography problem with D.C. Republicans, the D.C. pundit politician circle in there. For 4 years, they had to kind of balance as much as they could. Wow, Donald Trump, okay, he makes me uncomfortable, but he's really effective. People love him, but all my friends think he's a barbarian, so I kind of have to act like that, but kind of not. And the second they think the guy's out the door, they're trying to put a foot on his rear end and give him a nice little shove, so then they can look to all their friends and be like, look, I was one of the good ones during that whole icky transition time because they think there's some coming back. There is no going back. The days of George W. Bush are so far gone. The next 30 years of the Republican Party are going to look nothing like the last 30. Trump was a taste of what's to come.
I mean, for anybody that's wondering, I was talking to some friends about this recently. The old GOP was the GOP where when journalists were writing stories about how, and from big publications, by the way, stories about how Sarah Palin's child, who has special needs, may not really be hers. John McCain, GOP figures were like, well, you know, they're journalists. Let's just be silent about that. When, metaphorically speaking, somebody should have been taking their heads off, right? Where I agree with you, we're not going back to that. And I will say that the part of this that's a little happy place for me is I think some of the smarter libs, Jesse, recognize that. I think they know that folks like you and me, we see not only how Trump has been fighting, but also, you know, if you try to be a good guy, you try to be Brett Kavanaugh, you do nothing wrong. You be the guy that you want, other people are going to want coaching their daughter's basketball team on the weekends and who has done nothing but the right thing forever. If you're a Republican, they'll still try to ruin your life and dance on the fiery pyre that they make of your life.
I think, it's so funny you brought that up. I think that Brett Kavanaugh did as much to change Republican thinking as Donald Trump did in his entire 4 years as presidency. I think that experience radicalized more people on the right because of exactly what you just said. Brett Kavanaugh is such a nerd, it's almost alarming what a boring life the guy's had. The dork had a calendar, a desk calendar from high school. Who even keeps a calendar in high school, you goober? But Brett Kavanaugh did, and they made the guy out to be a serial alcoholic gang rapist. And people watched that, and they thought, if they can do that to him, they'll do it to anybody. People actually think that we're done with the barbarian days now that Trump is gone. Trump is the polite one. I'm telling you, the GOP within either next 4 years, at least the next 8 or 12, is going to nominate a fire-breathing dragon that is going to horrify people, and people are going to long for the days of Donald Trump. Mark my words.
Jesse, always great to see you, man. I'm with you.
See you, brother.
Coming up, time to launch a few clay pigeons and fire off today's buckshot. Stay right there. I only have one constant in my day when I wake up in the morning, and it's drinking a delicious cup of Black Rifle coffee. I absolutely love this delicious small batch roast-to-order coffee that's brought to you by veterans of the special operations community. In fact, Black Rifle Coffee Company CEO and founder Evan Hafer started the company after 20 years in the U.S. Army as an infantryman and special forces soldier. Evan founded Black Rifle Coffee in 2014 along with Army Ranger Matt Best. They combined two passions: developing premium fresh roasted coffee and honoring and supporting those who serve on the front lines. Black Rifle Coffee has donated over 45,000 pounds of coffee, or over 1 million cups of coffee, to soldiers deployed overseas, law enforcement officers, firefighters on the West Coast, and medical workers during the COVID-19 response. That's just in 2020 alone. For every coffee purchase you make throughout November, Black Rifle Coffee will send a bag of their limited edition holiday roast to a service member currently deployed overseas, to be delivered by Christmas morning. Being founded and operated by veterans, the team at Black Rifle Coffee knows what a quality cup of coffee means to active duty troops spending the holidays away from home. Want to support the cause? Go to blackriflecoffee.com/buck and check out the freshest coffee in America. The team has spent thousands of hours tasting, sourcing, perfecting coffee from all over the world. blackriflecoffee.com/buck gets you 20% off coffee, apparel, and gear, as well as 20% off your first month of the Coffee Club. The View has a tough time with the truth, and is President Trump the closest thing America has had to a dictator? Time for our daily roundup of terrible takes we call the Buckshot. Oh my, so much to choose from for internet-based stupidity these days. It's really hard to sift it down, I'll tell you. We leave some brilliant stuff, some wonderful clay pigeons, just calling out to be blown to smithereens. The dumbest takes imaginable. They're all over the internet. Let's start with, Ana Navarro, among the least worthwhile people you'll ever hear talk about politics on TV. Here she is with some interesting analysis of Trump and his family. Play it.
Donald Trump is not going away. He needs to continue the grift. He's going to continue doing rallies. He's going to continue talking for years about how the elections were robbed because it's all he has. And it's all his family of grifters have. I mean, what do you think? You think they can go back to New York and go back to the Met Gala? No. Do you think that they're going to go be happy going back to selling condos in Aventura? No. They need to keep this up so they can, be selling books and giving speeches and holding rallies and taking money from naive donors who are going to believe this story that the elections were fraudulent. There is no evidence of fraud. Zero.
Yes. What will the world-famous billionaire with his name on iconic buildings all over the world and the model wife and the large and lovely family do with himself if he's no longer president? I think he'll figure something out. I think he'll be okay. And I also think he's not going away from politics, but that's because he loves it and he wants to stay in this fight. And that's why the libs are so upset about it. Speaking about Trump, I think this guy is the former labor secretary. I don't know. He's a prickly little quasi-commie. Robert Reich. This is what he tweeted out. Donald Trump is the closest we have ever come to a dictator. Don't think we can't come closer. Never become complacent. Well, it's good to know that he thinks that somebody could be more of a dictator than the guy who is a dictator. How exactly? Because when someone disagrees with his administration, he goes to the courts. And when the courts don't always rule in his favor, he respects their decision and moves on to the next issue. What is the dictatorial thing that Trump has done? I always wonder. I ask this question. And where were all these people when Obama was just saying out loud, I don't have Congress in my back pocket, so I'm just going to do what I want to do because I'm the president. Pen and a phone. Remember that? Calling Trump a dictator. Simply absurd. Maybe they should ask General Flynn, who was Trump's incoming national security advisor, how much of a dictator Trump is, considering that one of his top people was ambushed under false pretenses by his own DOJ, and he is still going through the court system, folks. Hasn't been pardoned, still suffering through all that. Just like would have happened to one of Saddam's kids. Yeah, sure. And then we have, do I even have time for this one? I don't have time for this one. We'll have to hold it for tomorrow. You like that? We call that a cliffhanger in the biz, or do we? I don't even know if that's a TV term. I just made it up. That's it for Hold the Line with Buck Sexton. Up next, the No Spin News with Bill O'Reilly. Shields high.